Welcome to the Bowden Blitz ACC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bouton. Coach, week number 8 is on the horizon. We'll take a look at the updated conference odds entering the weekend. We've said it before. We'll say it again. The Miami Hurricanes are the team to beat. You see them right there at the start of the week, minus 175, followed by Georgia Tech and Duke. That will do battle this weekend. Then Virginia and SMU. Give me your thoughts about the conference as a whole entering week number 8 and just where the Hurricanes stand entering the weekend.
Well, the Hurricanes need to take care of their own business. Just continue to do what you've been doing. And, they get by this week. I see them just going on through the conference. The question is, who's gonna play them in the conference championship? I think this weekend is going to tell us a lot with Georgia Tech and Duke. It's going to tell us a lot about who is going to be their opponent, because I think those are the two front runners that we've got to watch closely, along with Virginia. So I think it's Miami clearly number one. They're going to line up better than everybody they play. They'll be a better football team than their opponents. If they get by this weekend, it should be fair sailing for them.
Now, when you look at Georgia Tech and Duke as a whole, they're going to square off this weekend. One team will have a conference loss. But assuming that they only have one conference loss and maybe they're on the outside looking in for an ACC championship, if they were able to run the table, be a 10-2 overall football team, and not make the conference championship, do you feel like a team like Georgia Tech or, in fact, Duke, that maybe even has 2 or 3 losses, potentially can knock down that door for the college football playoff?
Not with 3. You might get in with 2. I've got to see how it goes, but it's just not strong enough. I think you've got Miami for sure. You've got the one. I think if you get 2 victories and you're playing and you're right down to the wire for that conference championship, I think you can get in. But I still think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have the best chance of getting 3 people into the playoffs.
Let's take a look at the updated national championship odds. We know that Miami's potentially going to win their first ACC championship under Mario Cristobal. If they do that at plus 850, they have great value potentially to win a national championship. We talk about both sides of the football being physical. Let's just assume, though, Coach, Georgia Tech or Duke, whoever wins this weekend, if they were to go to the conference championship against the Hurricanes and potentially strike the upset, I mean, those odds are no longer going to be there potentially for a national championship. But in a one-game type of situation, anything is possible, right?
Right. Yeah, and if you're going to pick somebody when the money's good, grab Georgia Tech, because their quarterback makes them a different football team. If you think about him, if they're behind with 4 minutes left and you got to have a first down or a touchdown, or they're ahead and you just want to hold the clock, that's the guy you want with the ball. And he's the one guy I think that can take them to a critical, close football game where you got to have one play to win the game. He's the most important guy on the field. So I really like him. If you're going to pick somebody for the money down the road, jump on them now. You've got good odds going right now for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, we talk about some of the teams as well. Virginia playing very well with Tony Elliott. Rhett Lashley and SMU have a rematch of the conference championship game this weekend against Clemson. They went right down to the wire last year. Can they duplicate that type of performance in Death Valley? We'll break that game down a little bit later in the show. But when you just look at the situation, and we had talked about it earlier in the week with James Franklin, the opening at Penn State, a number of different ACC head coaches have been potentially named as maybe replacing James Franklin. I know that Bill O'Brien was mentioned to go back to Penn State. He was like a 16-1 shot to potentially, move on back to Penn State. Fran Brown has been mentioned, Pat Narduzzi because of the Pennsylvania ties. And obviously the situation with Dabo and Florida State with Mike Norvell not living up to expectations. Just give me your thoughts about the coaching perspective in the conference and how it might play out in Penn State, potentially one of these coaches moving on.
Well, I mean, just take a look at the Georgia Tech, the Duke game. Is it going to be a distraction? Because those coaches' names are going to be on everybody's short list. When you start winning, you're on everybody else's short list. It takes your mind away from it. Your staff may not know about it. Your players may not know about it. But I've been there. It does enter your mind. And so that's kind of the case right now is a game like a team like Penn State. but people think, well, they've got the finances, the money to do whatever it takes. And believe me, Penn State didn't pay that kind of money to remove James Franklin to go for anything less than the best you can possibly get. I'm going all the way up to Nick Saban or somebody like that. I just think you got to look at everybody as a possibility because they just made a move that was tough to make, felt like they had to make it. The money's too big. The wins are too important. And now which of these coaches in the ACC are being talked about so much? Mario Cristobal at Miami. Which of these guys are being talked about so much that it could be a distraction?
Now, from the coaching perspective, if you were in Manny Diaz or Brent Key's type of situation entering the weekend, motivationally, to keep the team focused, what is the head coach talking about to the team? Is he addressing it full on? Is he not bringing it up in team meetings, especially when there's the top matchup in the conference this weekend?
Well, the first thing a head coach can do, and I saw several of them do a good job of it this week, is to dispel any possibility that they're thinking about. Again, I am interested in going nowhere, but right here, I'm staying here. And I think at a Duke or a Georgia Tech, those players are locked in, and they know when that coach is focused. Because whatever you would think down the road you might want to do, winning this game Saturday will do nothing but enhance your position.
Absolutely. And again, we'll see how these situations play out. Another team that we're going to cover a little bit later in the show, and you're very familiar with the program, is Mike Norvell. We talked about them earlier in the week, dropping the ball game to Pitt last Saturday as a 10.5-point favorite. There's rumblings now. We talk about the buyout. And just from a mentality perspective, Florida State, I mean, we looked at like this season early on as potentially Florida State over-exceeding expectations, big picture. And then we fast forward 3 weeks later, they have 3 conference losses. But assuming they are able to get the win this weekend, big picture, maybe be a 6, 7, or an 8-win football team, is that enough to carry the momentum, big picture, for Mike Norvell in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, really, I thought before the season began how bad last year went, that their project was a 2-year project. They may get halfway there this year. I said this before the season, but it was a 25 to 30 game movement toward the championship level. That's 2 years. Then when he beat Miami, we all got sucked in. They beat Miami. Then they paid 2 guppies and went 77-10 and 63-10, and the stats got inflated. We all got big picture, and then they've come back down to earth. They're halfway there maybe this year. But I think the main thing is he better, and we'll talk about it, but FSU better get their act together this week. This is the right time. This is the right opponent for FSU to go out there and notch a W, because they've got to win 3 out of their final 6 just to get to a bowl, or maybe they're talking about his job being on the line if he doesn't.
17.5-point road favorites in Palo Alto. We saw Boston College and Bill O'Brien limp out to Palo Alto and come back with a 30-20 loss. So it's not going to be easy for the Seminoles on Saturday night. Quickly, Heisman Trophy. We know about Carson Beck, but if Darian Mensah and Haynes King perform, let's say, lights out, and whichever team wins, any chance that potentially one of those players could hoist the hardware?
Well, let me tell you what I would think would happen. Haynes King, to me, is a guy that just by the way he runs their offense, in the last minute or two of any game, he's the guy that makes it happen. So you could see him being the guy that could actually getting them to win a championship game. But all of a sudden, you talk about the money, 16-1 odds, you might want to grab him while he's cheap because that's the guy that just might. I don't think anybody else can threaten Miami if they keep on going to a championship game, except a guy like Haynes King.
When we come back on the Bowden Blitz, we'll start breaking down Week 8 in the ACC. Clemson, SMU, Georgia Tech, Duke coming up next. Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden breaking down Week 8 in the ACC. We'll take a look at last year's championship rematch. SMU goes on the road. They're 4-2 overall. This line opened up at 9.5 on Sunday night. We're now seeing 5.5s creep into the market. We talk about the dominance under Dabo Swinney for Clemson in Death Valley. Dating back to 2015, Coach, they are now 71-7 straight up. They're 1-2 this year. Started very disappointing. The loss against LSU, and more importantly, the loss after that to Syracuse. But they've been playing with momentum. They do have a hot quarterback in Cade Klubnik. How do you see this matchup playing out Saturday afternoon?
Well, they've kind of got their act going together with two good wins in the conference, but I mean, Cade Klubnik may not be able to go completely. They've got an ankle injury. He came out last week. The line dropped from 9.5 to 5.5 in the last day or so. Makes me wonder. I mean, I was all over Clemson at 9.5. I just say, you know what? At home, they're going to get that touchdown ahead, 10 points ahead. But right now, if it drops like that, I mean, Kevin Jennings is a heck of a quarterback, and SMU is a very established quarterback situation. Very, very shaky at Clemson without Klubnik playing quarterback. It's a great home field advantage. They've got the roll going, but SMU has won the last couple of games as well. So they're both rolling and rocking pretty good. I just think without Klubnik, I'm going to lean toward SMU and the points.
Well, when you talk about the success of Clemson, you have talked about it all year, the lack of consistency in the rushing attack. They entered that matchup last week only averaging around 110 yards per game. They busted out with their best performance against Boston College, 226 yards on the road in Chestnut Hill, 5.2 yards per carry. Assuming that Klubnik is a no-go, they're going to need the rushing attack to not only win the game, but get the cover against the Mustangs.
Now you've hit the most important point there. They established some run last week. I was shocked they didn't do it the week before where they could have had all the yardage they wanted rushing. Last week, 167, 169 yards of rushing. If Klubnik can't go or is limited, they've got to run the football. They can't make him sit in that pocket and scramble around every play. They've got to give him some manageable third downs, some handoffs that he can have. Running game is critical for them this game. We're going to find out. I've never felt like they were committed to the running attack. We're going to find out if last week was who they are or that was just who they were pretending to be.
And if they're going to run the football, it's not going to be easy going up against the front seven of SMU. They're allowing only 107 rushing yards per game, only 3 yards per carry. Let's not forget last year as well, SMU had one of the better rush defenses in all of FBS. How much do you put in to Rhett Lashley and the revenge factor, knowing that they lost this game with obviously the conference on the line? What can they learn from that loss last year? They really made a second half effort to get back into that football game. But what can they do from last year's loss that they can carry on the road in Death Valley Saturday afternoon?
Well, they've got enough players on their football team that played last year. I mean, as they prepared this week for the game and they show video, they got to make sure their players see what happened last year, what they've got to do to win this game, and how important this game becomes as we talk about who's going to challenge and maybe play against Miami for the conference championship. Because again, we've got a couple of teams. We still got Georgia Tech with no conference losses. And I think several teams with no conference losses. Duke doesn't have a conference loss, so they know this game is important. They just have to show last year's video to show how much important it is to get. Clemson still can be a factor in knocking somebody else out of this thing.
And we'll see how it plays out. Coach and I both like SMU with the points. Even without Klubnik, Coach, I think SMU might push a little bit of tempo. It's a pretty high total. We haven't seen Clemson really burst through the total, even though they put up 41 points in the victory last week. They were under the total against Boston College, right on the number, did sneak past it against North Carolina. I do feel this game potentially plays out a little bit like it did last year, so we'll see if we get points in that matchup in Death Valley. We'll turn our attention to the biggest game of the weekend. Takes place at Duke. Manny Diaz and the Blue Devils open up as a 2.5-point home favorite over undefeated Brent Key and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech got the victory on Saturday afternoon against Virginia Tech, covered a 14.5-point number, winning by 15. They go on the road. They came out of a bye week and started very fast at home. Can they have the same type of effort on the road in Durham Saturday afternoon?
Well, they've got to start fast against Duke. Duke has a much more prolific offense. They can score a lot more points. You can't fall behind against Duke with Darian Menza at quarterback. You'll have a hard time catching up. So that's one of the keys of this game. Georgia Tech has got to start fast, and they've got to find a way to slow down that productive Duke offense, just as Duke is going to want to try to shut down a little bit of that running game at Georgia Tech that's so strong. But it should be a great contest in this game. Two great quarterbacks who go about it a little differently. The dual threat quarterback for Georgia Tech is going to find a way to get every first down, find a way to get a touchdown. Menza can just hit the big play because of what he is. But you know what? I said this earlier today, that when it comes down to the last 4 minutes of a ball game, and if you've got to hold on to the ball so the other team doesn't get the ball one more chance, or you've got to drive it down for one last score, my money's on Haynes King. He will make the first downs to get you to hold the clock, or he'll make the points to get you to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely, and his versatility has taken off pressure off the offensive line. Through 6 games, offensive line has only allowed 3 sacks on the season. So if Duke can't generate a pass rush, that means manageable third down situations, moving the chains, and more importantly, potentially more scoring opportunities. A player to keep an eye out. We know about Jamal Haynes. Malachi Hosley, the transfer from Penn, dynamic effort last week, over 120 yards on the ground, 11.2 yards per carry. Coach, he's utilized in fly sweeps. He's a pocket rocket, can also catch the football out of the backfield. They love to get him out in space.
Well, anytime you've got a threat like that that's different than the guy that generally gets the ball, you've got a chance to be a dual threat, to have a different option to go to, and you've got to find a way to get the ball to your player. Remember, when it comes to big games, it isn't about plays, it's about players. Getting the ball to the right players that can make the plays.
When we come back, we'll talk about the battle in Palo Alto, Seminoles and Cardinal coming up next. Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bouton breaking down Week 8 in the ACC. We left off talking a little Clemson, SMU, Georgia Tech, and Duke. We'll turn our attention to the late night ball game in Palo Alto. Florida State looking to get right after 3 straight losses. Huge favorite of 17.5 points on the road against the Stanford Cardinal. Coach, they're still averaging 274 rushing yards per game. If the Seminoles are going to get right, it does have to come this Saturday night against Stanford.
Absolutely. This is the game. They can't wait one more game. They've got to now the long trip, late night game, that may have an impact, but if you're going to turn it around and get yourself going, it needs to be against Stanford, because you've got to start now. Mike Norvell has got to get them to a bowl somehow, get a 6-win season, and he's got it. This one, you got to start it now, because they're on the skids. They've lost 8 straight ACC games since last year. They're 1-10 against ACC opponents, and right now everybody went from a disaster last year to getting your hopes so high and then having them drop this year. Very important, if he doesn't want to lose those players, is to get this game, get a win under your belt right now, because it only gets harder after this game.
Now, they were able to run the football in the early part of the season. Obviously, against Alabama was one of their best performances, 240 yards on the ground en route to the victory as basically a double-digit underdog at home. They followed it up with another dynamic effort against Kent State, 498 yards. They averaged 9.2 yards per carry, but we've seen the rushing attack be a little bit less effective week to week to week, and they were completely shut down by an above average defense in the Pitt Panthers. So when you look at this defense for Stanford, they're still good in run support, giving up 114 yards on the ground. If you're Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn, are you attacking on the ground or going with your ace in the hole, Thomas Castellanos?
Well, you're going with Thomas, but part of his offense, a huge part, is on the ground. He has got to mix the run in with the pass and either hand off the side, the jet sweep, or take it up the middle, or hand it off in the middle. He goes out to the outside. That running game is a major part of their offense. Their offense really hasn't played so bad that they can say they lost it because of their offense. It's their defense that's been their weakness. But they got inflated stats in those two games after Alabama. They've got some inflated stats in their rush game. They're not as good as they thought they were. They're definitely got to improve on defense. But you can't say that Tommy Castellanos is going to throw and not run, because it's the running game that makes their downfield throw so easy to get, because people are trying to stop that run.
And we talk about the situation in Florida as a whole. Billy Napier for the Gators, potentially on the hot seat, could be out by the end of the weekend. Does that put pressure on Florida State? You mentioned the 8 straight losses in conference. Mike Norvell, 3 straight losses after the 3-0 start this year. Where are we looking Mike Norvell? I mean, what saves him this year? 7 wins, 6 wins? Is it the fact that they knock off potentially another top 25 caliber team? Give me your thoughts about where he stands entering week number 8.
And now, if I can look at everything I know about Florida State, again, my dad there 34 years. Financially, they've spent $180 million on new stadium improvements. They've given him one of the best buyout contracts you can possibly have. After that undefeated season he had 2 years ago, they sold out and gave him everything. And so they really can't afford to make that move. They can't afford not to if it goes to the bottom. But if he can get to 6 wins, get to a bowl, I think they can get through it. Because I think FSU needs to do that because of where they have their money tied up. And in my mind, unless it gets to be such a disaster that it turns out like last year, and they don't feel like they can bleed the money out that bad. 'Cause you start bleeding pretty bad if you lose every game.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing, too, is like the pendulum of the fan base, the swing of emotion. 2 years ago, this team wins an ACC championship. They're 13-0. They're on the outside of the college football playoff. The attrition, they then follow that up with a 2-10 season last year where the kids were checked out after the loss against Georgia Tech, and now you start 3-0, you get the victory. That might have been the worst thing, Coach, getting the victory over Alabama, because then the emotion goes to a sky high level. Would you agree with that?
Oh, no question. And then they played East Texas A&M and Kent State. Now, I have nothing against those two teams, but then they padded the score. I mean, you got a new offensive coordinator. He wants to be known for offense, so they ram it up 66 and 73 points. They're doing that to make their stats look good. Defensively, they shut those two teams down, and then reality hit, but they're paying for that right now. Play a solid game, get your win against Stanford so you can get back and get to work.
We'll see you next week on the Bowden Blitz. Have a great week, everyone.